We've got magic to do just for you. We've got modal scales to build. Yes, my friends, today we will be building modes. All 7 modes, in fact, the 7 diatonic scales. Before we can build our modes, we first must understand what a mode is. Just like the ice cream I was enjoying earlier, the mode of a melody can have many different flavors and colors. Most of our Western art music is based on one of these 7 modes. And just like the branches of a family tree, each mode has a relative relationship with the major or natural minor scales, which we have already built and enjoyed. And in order to memorize the modes, the order of the modes that is, there's an acronym that I always teach my students, and that is I don't play loud music at lunch. You're like, but I do play loud music at lunch. Well, in that case, I do play loud music at lunch. And that gives you the order of the 7 modes. The I stands for Ionian, which we have already built. D is Dorian. P is Phrygian. L is Lydian. M is Mixolydian. A is Aeolian, or the natural minor. And L, unfortunately, is Locrian. Don't like that scale very much. But anyway, we will be learning how to build all 7 of these modes. But Mr. J, you say we've already built the Ionian and Aeolian scales. Yes, indeed we have. The Ionian scale is the modal name for the major scale, which we've already built, sung, sight read in, and even composed a melody based on the Ionian scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So that would be the half step in between 3 and 4, and then the other half step between 7 and 8. We've also built the natural minor scale, which we've discussed with a relative and parallel relationship. The natural minor is known as Aeolian, which is la, ti, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, so, fa, mi, re, do, ti, la. And there are the Ionian and Aeolian scales. So the first scale degree, the do scale, and the la scale, or the 6th. So we will be discussing the other scales in relationship to these 2. So, if we're going to build the Dorian scale, which is the 2nd scale in the order of diatonic scales, we always want to start with the major scale. So, if we were to say we're going to start with the key signature of C major, no flats and no sharps, and that is the Ionian scale, we would go up to the don't, the I don't play loud music at lunch, which is the D, the Dorian scale. So if we start with C major and we find the supertonic note, which we've already learned is re, or the 2nd scale degree, that in this case of C major would be D, a major 2nd up from C. So step 1 would be build your clef and your key signature. If we're not going to have a key signature, because we're going to start in the key of C, we would build C to C with no sharps and no flats. However, if we start on the supertonic note of the C scale, that will give us the relative Dorian of C major. So, starting on re, which would be the note D, build our diatonic scale, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and D. That would give us the relative Dorian of C major, meaning has the same key signature, but a different tonic note, that is D. And now instead of getting C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, which is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, here's do if we start on the re, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, re, do, ti, la, so, fa, mi, re. Now, that gives us the Dorian scale, re to re, and then relative relationship. As we see, just like the minor scale, we still have a minor 3rd between the 1st and the 3rd notes, the tonic and the mediant, which means there is a diatonic half step between 2 and 3, just like there was in the natural minor scale. However, in this scale, unlike the minor scale, we have the other half step between 6 and 7, because we had 5 and 6 in the minor scale, because in the minor scale for D minor we would have a B flat. So one way you could think of this from a parallel relationship is saying in the key of D minor we would have 1 flat. If we want to go from the D minor scale to the D Dorian scale, all you have to do is start with natural minor and then sharp the 6th scale degree. And that would give us B natural and therefore the Dorian scale. And that would be a parallel relationship from D minor. You could also do a parallel relationship from the major. If we're starting with D major, same tonic, different key signature, we would have 2 sharps. Going from the D major scale to the D Dorian scale, or any major scale to Dorian scale from a parallel relationship, we would take away 2 sharps, or flat the 3rd and the 7th, thereby giving us the relative Dorian, again, of C major. Take away the F, take away the C, or, in other words, in the circle of fifths, go over 2 counterclockwise, and that will give you the major to Dorian parallel relationship. So you might be asking yourself, well, that's all great, but what in the world would we use this scale for? It is true that there is few melodies in the classical tradition that uses this scale. However, there are several popular melodies, especially from the 1960s, that use this Dorian mode. So the minor mode, with the B flat, D minor with the B flat, all we do is raise that B flat to B natural, and then we get this sound. Instead of this, that's the natural minor. This is the Dorian. And we still have the flatted 7th, the Flevin, or the Te relationship between the Do and the Te, or if you're doing relative minor, the La and the So. So, if we use Scarborough Fair, that is a melody that is very popular, at least back in the 60s. So that sounds like minor, and yes, the Dorian scale is very similar to minor. However, when we go to the next part of that melody, there's the sharped 6th, right there, the B natural. So that is a melody based on this color, this Dorian mode. There's that sharp 6th. Just a slightly different color, slightly different flavor than the minor. The Phrygian scale is the 3rd scale in the order of the scales, which means if we start in the key of C major, we're going to start on Mi for the relative relationship. The mediant note in C major would be E, which would be a major 3rd relationship. When we have a major 3rd relationship, that means that from whatever major key you are in, you go up a major 3rd, and that will be the tonic of the Phrygian scale. So step 1, we're going to start with the clef, and then we are going to think C major, 0 flats, 0 sharps. Up a major 3rd from C is E. Start on E, and then you build the scale diatonically from E to E with the same key signature as C major, which is no flats and no sharps. And now, as you can see, we have a half step between 1 and 2, and we have a half step between 5 and 6. Here's the Phrygian scale. We could sing Mi to Mi. Mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, re, mi, re, do, ti, la, sol, fa, mi. And that is the Phrygian scale. The 4th scale is the Lydian scale in the order. I don't play loud. So that means it's the subdominant note of the major scale, which will become the tonic in the relative relationship for Lydian. So again, start with C major, and use your clef. We'll go bass clef this time for some variety. no flats, no sharps would be the key signature for C major. Go up a perfect fourth from Do to Fa. Start on Fa, which is F. Build the diatonic scale. And we have the Lydian scale. In this case, F Lydian. Notice that, just as we talked about with the major and the minor scale, whatever the name of the scale is, in this case, F Lydian, F is always the first note of the scale. Even though we're relating it to the key of C major, we're starting on F. Okay, so we have in the Lydian scale, from a parallel perspective, we have the half steps between 4 and 5, and between 7 and 8. If you notice, the F major scale would have one flat, so if we're thinking the parallel relationship between the major and the Lydian, we would simply go from F major and raise the fourth scale degree to B natural, and that would be the parallel way of thinking about Lydian. Raising the fourth scale degree of any major scale, a half step, will give you the Lydian scale. Other than the other L scale, the Locrian scale, this is certainly the most dissonant and unusual scale of the 7 diatonic scales. The final scale that we will be discussing today is the Mixolydian scale, which is also known as the dominant scale. So that means, from a relative perspective, we would go up a perfect fifth to the dominant of the major scale, and that will become the tonic of the Mixolydian scale. So in this case, again, we're thinking of C, up a perfect fifth from C is G, and that would become our tonic of the G Mixolydian scale, with the same key signature as C major. So, step 1, let's do our clef. We'll do alto clef this time, I know your favorite one. Do the key signature for C major, which is no flats, no sharps, and then build your diatonic scale between G and G, thereby giving us the G Mixolydian scale. Now, you may notice that if we're thinking from a parallel perspective, the Mixolydian scale is simply the major scale with the flatted seventh. So, when you hear a major scale, okay, that gives us that F sharp. And to get from major to the parallel Mixolydian scale, we would flat the 7, or do the fleven. In this case, since the 7th is sharped, we would just erase the sharp, and that would give us our flatted 7th. So the Mixolydian scale sounds like this. Hope you have enjoyed the lesson on our tonal modes, our diatonic scales that have all different flavors and colors from the major and the minor. We will be discussing ways in which all of these scales relate to actual musical examples this week in class, and we will, of course, have an assessment to build all of these scales at the end of the 9 weeks. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you for participating in Mr. J's Masterpiece Theory a la mode.